Hi, everyone. This is Mako Fujimura in my studio in Princeton. Thank you for subscribing to my Substack. It's been a good way for me to try out ideas with you and to get some feedback along the way. I will continue to post. For those who are paid subscribers, I want to also thank you that you are supporting the important work of culture care. And this term, which I coined in 1990s, has really become one of the key cornerstones of how we speak about our time, and giving an alternative language for culture that has been dominated by culture wars language. Culture care is not a war against culture wars. I realize that there are many issues that we need to fight for and to defend. But as a general metaphor, we need to understand that culture wars metaphor has largely failed to produce the kind of result that we want to leave to our children. It may win in short-term skirmishes, but you win by demonizing the other side and therefore pouring toxins into the very soil of culture. Thereby, when the next generation comes along and wants to grow something in that soil, it doesn't grow because it's completely, the soil is tainted with so many toxins that we have poured into our own grounds by demonizing the other side. Today is Monday after Easter, and we heard this morning that Pope Francis passed away. And I have a meeting to do a podcast or a conversation on video on some of the legacies that Pope Francis has given us. And so this, unfortunately, today will be in remembrance of him. But as I think about this Pope who Hejin and I had the privilege of meeting in a private meeting without any aid or even a translator. We had a private meeting alone with him, discussing our work of beauty and justice. The two dear sisters, nuns from Flint, Michigan, were instrumental in guiding us there to bring Kintsugi Bowl to Pope Francis. At the time, this was 2.5 years ago. We were invited into the Vatican by a handwritten letter from Pope Francis. And astonishingly, we were allowed inside in his guest house quarters where he chose to stay rather than in the palace that's designated for popes to live in. We met this man who dedicated his life to the poor, but also creation of beauty. And it was very evident from the get-go when we entered. We waited for him. We didn't know how long we had. So I even asked the aide, so how long is this meeting? And he said, he's the Pope. And so we waited and we were expecting at least a translator to come along, but he came in as a walker by himself. And he wanted a private time with us. And it became very obvious why. In the challenges of his days, two things that he dearly loved was to talk about mercy, serving the poor and the marginalized, and to talk about art and beauty. He kept on saying, as I have written about this many times, but and it's in our new book. Hejin and I have just finished the manuscript for our next book, Beauty Times Justice. It's beauty and justice, but we're promoting it as beauty times justice because justice multiplies the effect of beauty and vice versa. So it's quite appropriate for us to have finished this book really inspired and by Pope Francis, who obviously Hejin's work has been ongoing, my work has been ongoing, but a meeting with him that I think encapsulated how important this theme was to him personally and his exhortation to us. You are the creators of the good and the beautiful. He kept on saying that, and as we were leaving, he held my shoulders. Even though he was using a walker, he came to me and he said, "What you do to create beauty matters, and the darkness will push away, but don't stop. Keep going." I have tears as I remember that moment. I have shared this with countless artists along the way. But it doesn't matter if they're Catholics or Protestants or religious at all. They could be atheists, but they also had tears. Why? It's because we don't hear that. Someone that important would take his time to tell us and tell me personally what you do matters, that you are creating beauty, and that is enough. And the reality of the world, the market system, the art world too, the church too, will push back against what you're doing in some way, subtle or obvious ways. But don't stop. That was his exhortation. And as I think about him, the legacy that will continue, you should definitely read his last homily on Easter, the day before he passed. Of course, a great man would choose his time to say to us, to look at Jesus and his resurrection. What the disciples did, the women who came to the tomb, they came running. But we're looking at the wrong place because the Lord is not there. The Lord is everywhere else. And we need to find him in our conversations, in our studios, in backstages, in places where we do not expect God to show up, like in the slums of Southeast Asia. Jesus is there through the orphans and people who have been marginalized and oppressed and abused. Jesus is there among the sick, among the wounded, among those who have been exiled from power, those who are imprisoned, those who have been cast aside. So let's go find him. Let's go meet him in places, in the cracks in between the power struggles that culture wars will produce. And it is in the cracks that we find light, right? This kintsugi bowl that we gave to Pope Francis is a picture of Hejin explaining kintsugi as a gospel message to Pope Francis. And of course, he would welcome that because he loved Japanese culture. Most people don't know that he wanted to be a missionary in Nagasaki. His main student, who is now the pastor presiding over the 26 Martyrs Museum, the church there, he told me that personally, that Pope Francis loves Japan. And so giving him a kintsugi bowl of Korean bowl significantly mended in Japan by a kintsugi master, served tea in Japan by a high tea master, and that broke. And it was important enough for generations later that those broken pieces were put that back together, and not to fix it, but to create something new. Out of his wounds, we are healed, and out of brokenness, we find new life and new hope and new beauty. And that's what this day, as I recall Pope Francis, and as I celebrate his life, has meant to all of us. God bless you. And I'm going to talk more about Japan in my next episode.